What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and Al Ewing is giving us our first look at the Gold Lantern in DC Comics, in the Absolute Universe. And here's the crazy thing. This story is going to do more to unite the Absolute Universe, connecting all these different dots, than any story before it. So Superman, Batman, Martian Manhunter, it's all getting pulled together. So what this does is this picks up with issue number 5. Specifically, it goes back to when Sojourner Mullein first became the Green Lantern from touching Abin Sur. And when that happened, Hal Jordan here, who of course is a little more panicky than we're traditionally used to, right, a little more on edge, of course has a gun in his possession and immediately draws it on Abin Sur. And Abin Sur says she has power without understanding. She is anomaly. And Hal asks the question, right, what does that mean? And Abin Sur says anomalies cannot exist in the spectrum of light. She will be sought, hunted. Be with fear, Hal Jordan. Now, that's the thing to keep in mind here, is whenever Abin Sur says a thing, what we seem to have gotten so far is that it's always the inverse, right? Be without fear, do not be afraid. Be with fear, be afraid. Fear for your friend's safety. Now, all these things are going to become important here in a little while once we actually explain how the spectrum of light works. But Hal Jordan, in this moment of panic, ends up shooting and killing Abin Sur. But in the moment before Abin Sur dies, he reaches out to Hal Jordan and grabs him, and he says, "Judgment. Judgment, Hal Jordan, the Black Hand." And that is how Hal Jordan ended up getting the Black Hand in the first place. Now, one of the things to keep in mind, when Hal Jordan becomes the Black Hand, for lack of a better word, right, the gun literally being transformed into seemingly the thing that infects him, he seems to have all the same abilities that a Green Lantern would traditionally have. And so people have been trying to reconcile, right, the Black Lantern Corps versus the Red Lantern Corps, like how does all that stuff work? And Hal Jordan asked the question, right, what did you do? And that's when Abin Sur says, judgment. Judgment is no longer in progress, and Abin Sur cannot now be appointed. And how far out? How far out is the world that's coming? Be with fear, Hal Jordan. Fear the Black Hand, and fear the Black Star. And so that's the crazy thing, because at that point, Abin Sur essentially dies. And so what it does is it jumps back to this current moment in the fight between Hal Jordan and Sojourner Mullein. So basically the Green Lantern versus what appeared to be the combination of the Black and the Red Lantern. Now, the Red Lantern aspect only really seemed to come by way of personality, because historically speaking in DC Comics, Red Lanterns represent rage. Most all of you guys who read Green Lantern know that. And so Hal Jordan, in this moment of freaking out, right, so full of anger and so full of rage, when he had revealed to Sojourner that he had killed Abin Sur, she seemingly flipped, because any answers that they could have gotten now based on everything that's going on are gone. There's no chance to get them. So many people within the city had basically been believed to have been killed. John Stewart was yanked into the Green Lantern, so there's no way to get answers from him, even though he was the one that was seemingly able to figure out the weakness of it being the color yellow or anything made of gold. There's no Guy Gardner here at the moment. He was seemingly killed. Kyle Rayner was referenced, so there really isn't any information coming from anybody. And that's where Hal tries to justify, right? I thought he'd killed you, Joe. The cafe fell down around us. Todd was dead under the rubble. I saw a flash of green light, and then you were gone. What could I think? That's why I pulled the trigger. And that's why all of this is happening. So what happened to you, Joe? And she just says this, and then immediately goes on the attack against Hal Jordan. And it's like, the Green Lantern happened. Now, one of the things that I hope you guys are starting to pick up on from both of these guys, which is kind of interesting here, is they're both demonstrating some measure of uncontrollability, right, on an emotional side. That despite how well she seems composed, Sojourner feels like she's full of rage, right? She's full of confusion. She doesn't understand what's going on. Hal Jordan's emotions are pretty straightforward here. And Sojourner says, it fell out of the sky and everything in me was screaming to get out before it hit. The next thing I know, I'm in the desert, no idea where, what direction I traveled in, until I felt a pull like a compass needle towards you. And that's where Hal says no towards the Black Hand, because it was getting stronger and it was taking control and killing people because of her, because of you. So this power he has is partially speaking through him. And he says, you brought the Green Lantern down. You destroyed Evergreen. You stole the power of the Abin Sewer. You are anomaly, Sojourner Mullein. And that's where Sojourner starts to pick up on what's happening. And she asks the question, who's talking, Hal? Because you're not the one talking. Someone else is talking through you. Who is talking? And that's where he just continues on without even answering, right? It was you and the ring. Take off the ring, Sojourner Mullein. Take off the ring. And that's where she's just kind of like, what? Because now it's this heightened state of confusion. She doesn't know who's talking through Hal. Hal's probably not even in control of himself anymore. They keep talking about taking off the ring, and she doesn't know if taking the ring off is a good thing or a bad thing. Is she being given instructions to save her life, or is she being given instructions to weaken her in order to kill her? There's no way that she could possibly know. And so all she does is just take the risk, right? Having power is better than having no power in the face of something like this. And so she just says, make me. And she blasts this thing with as much power as she possibly can and then races off. And while Hal Jordan follows her as best he can, at that point you switch over to Hector Hammond, who's kind of watching everything unfold. Now, Hector Hammond in the Absolute Universe is very different from the one that we're used to in the main DC universe, physically more than anything else, right? The guy's not a giant head attached to a tiny body, but he's still every bit nefarious as he's always been. He's exceedingly rich, and one of the things we're going to find out here in a second is he's well aware of who Ra's al Ghul is in the Absolute Superman universe. But in the fight between Sojourner and Hal Jordan, they're basically pulled, if not potentially guided, back towards the Green Lantern. And when that happens, they're all snatched inside. And the one person that's just sitting there waiting for them is Golden John Stewart, the Gold Lantern. And he says, Sojourner Mullein, Hal Jordan, be without fear. And so that's where he goes into this exposition. And that's where we start getting answers about what's happening here. Because the question's asked, how far out is the world that's coming? And that's when you jump to Agent Chase. And that's a crazy thing. Cameron Chase, for those of you guys who are unfamiliar with DC Comics, she's basically part of a supernatural investigative team in the main DC universe. And so her job is to go out there and investigate paranormal things. And all that kind of falls under Amanda Waller, or at least it did at one point in time, because Amanda Waller basically oversaw everything in terms of how the federal government monitored and managed metahuman affairs, right? Superman, Batman, the Flash, Green Lantern, Swamp Thing, John Constantine, all those things kind of fell under the purview of Amanda Waller. And Cameron Chase was just one part of that much larger equation. But in the Absolute Universe, things are still the same, but a little bit different at the same time. And so when Cameron Chase is brought into this office of her superior, we're actually going to find out she's kind of the link that brings Batman, Superman, and all those different guys together. That's why this conversation is so important. Because initially they talk about her caseload, right? She says, you pulled me off Nevada and California. That leaves what? Oregon? And what's in Oregon? She says, Oregon's squared away by Tuesday. Monday? Lunch. And she says, what do I do the rest of the week? Count ceiling tiles? I told you I'm not going to transfer east. And of course her boss is like, you absolutely can't smoke in here. And so she's like, whatever. And she asks, is this about Evergreen? And he says, it's not entirely about Evergreen. And she says, so it is about Evergreen. Just say it, right? And he says, the Evergreen situation does potentially cover the relevant states. And so then she asks, California, the entire state of California? And he says, it's close enough to the border that presumably it would involve California. And that's why it kind of continues on. You know why this is. You know why I cannot put you on Evergreen. You can't even go near it. Every regulation says that. And I'm doing you a favor here, right? I'm helping you, and you see that, right? Like, tell me that you see my side. And so she asks, so did Hector Hammond buy you a beach house or what? And then she just put on administrative leave. And so we're going to circle back around to her here in a minute, because again, she's going to become important. But that's when you get this explanation from John Stewart, because John says, all of this is Oa. Don't panic. Don't be afraid. I'm going to work to translate these concepts as best I can. Try to understand. And he says, the Abin Sur is the judge of worlds. A community is a world in miniature. So a testing ground was chosen and contained, and judgment began. On the ground, evaluation is only the first stage. The second stage is transport into the Green Lantern, and throughout it, into the presence of Oa. And he says, but Owens don't think like we do. They do not have the perspective we do. People were afraid. People died, but not everyone. And that's when you see Guy Gardner. And so that's where Sojourner is just kind of like, okay, you're alive. Like everyone here in the town is alive. Like we all thought they were dead. And the response of John, we're all alive, Joe. Let yourself know it. Let yourself understand it. We're all together here in the place of understanding, and we are all without fear. And that's the crazy thing, because in turn, Hal Jordan says, fear is all I can feel. It's the hand. The hand does not like to be here. And Guy Gardner chimes in, there are 4 levels of light. Chord is the lowest, then Rao, then Sir, then R. Chaotic action, restraint from action, correct action, total understanding, enlightenment. Now, this is an important thing here, because what is Rao? I mean, if you guys are familiar with the Superman mythos, you guys know Rao is the god of the Kryptonians. And so there's a lot of theories out there that at some point along the line, the Kryptonians were visited. Right, they were visited by an Abin Sur, and so they in turn took this concept of restrained action and kind of adopted it as a sort of deity, and that in some capacity they were corrupted by it. Because lest we forget, within the absolute universe, the Kryptonian higher class, right, the upper class, were essentially going to leave all the citizens, the regular people of Krypton, to die when the planet exploded. But one of the things to keep in mind here is that the only knowledge we have of how everything unfolded on the planet Krypton is from the perspective of Superman, who was little less than a teenager at the time that it all happened. So we basically have a young child's perspective of the ending of his world. That simply means we don't actually know what really happened and if he saw it as it actually happened. Those are a lot of the questions that we still have to have answered. And so in response to everything that Guy Gardner is saying, the responses to General Mullein, that does not make me want to panic any less, John. Is Guy okay in there, right? Like, what is this place? What's the Green Lantern? What is Oa? What was Abin Sur judging us for? And the response of John, the Abin means the adept, the controller, the guardian. The Abin Sur was a guardian at the green level of light. The task of an Abin Sur is to select Ains, initiates into light for what's coming. Guy showed restraint, so he was judged as deserving of the red flame. And that's the crazy thing, is red flame is restraint. It's not rage. And that's where Hal asked the question, what about me? Did I deserve this? Talking in my head, telling me every dark thought I have is right. Why would he do that to me? What good is that? Right? I try so hard to control it, to stop it. And Guy Gardner responds, every flame can be controlled, but you must have understanding to command the flame. Total understanding. Control of the flame without understanding is Tomar. Anomaly. And that's where Sojourner's just like, now I know there's something wrong with you guys, right? Something wrong in your heads. Acting like this is just some big lesson to learn instead of a bomb strapped to our friend, a bomb that keeps going off. And for what? Right? Hal's right. Why did Abin Sur do it? And the response of John, that I don't know. And we cannot ask because he's dead. Chaotic action. All I can tell you is what I've seen and what I've learned, what's coming for us. And he says, I've only scratched the surface, but I was chosen because I sought knowledge, Joe, selected for the gold flame. Ain R. R is the highest level. Chord, the lowest. But see, that's the Owen perspective. There are others that look in the opposite direction, who see Oa as incorrect. They take power from the dark, power without restraint. The Abin Chord, the Weaponers, the Black Stars. How far out is the world that's coming, Joe? How far out is the world of chaos? How far out is the Black Star world? How far out is Mogo? Which is crazy, because in the main DC universe, Mogo, as most of you guys know, is a Green Lantern planet. And the idea that Mogo is home to basically those individuals who choose to embrace the darkness, who choose to embrace what you and I would consider to be chaotic power, is kind of nuts. I don't know that I would use simplistic terms like evil versus good or anything like that, but the fact that he's not part of a peacekeeping force is kind of nuts, because when Hal Jordan sees it, he says, that's it, right? That's the thing in my head. It's the size of a planet, and it's in my head. And that's where Guy says, enemies fear the face of steel. And Sojourner's just like, screw this, right? She's like, I'm the Tomar or whatever, right? I'm the anomaly. All Abensur's power, none of his knowledge. I don't know what the rules are, not like you, John, but if I don't know the rules, then I'll have to stick to them. And if Abensur put this crap into you, Hal, then I'm betting I can get it out. Give me your hand. And that's where Hal's just like, no, right? It wants to kill you, so I don't want you to die. And she just says, right? It's the darkness. It wants to eat the light. But you heard what John said. It's all one thing. We're all one thing. You're just at the lowest level. And that's all, right? You're not some entity out there separate from all of this. And so she says, somebody's got to help you up. Give me your hand. And when Hal Jordan does that, she removes all that black impurity from him, right? Like there is no more black hand at that point. And Hal just goes back to seemingly his normal self. And so she's like, let's get out of here, right? And they immediately jump out of the Green Lantern. Now, of course, when that happens, all that just black ooze comes pouring out of this thing. And in turn, like the Green Lantern just disappears, but not before Hector Hammond tries to get his guys to either follow Sojourner Mullein or analyze what's going on here. Now, here's where things start getting tied together into the larger absolute universe, because while all of this is being watched and Hector Hammond is told that they can't follow Sojourner Mullein, she's just going too fast, right? She flew out of range. And so he says, okay, right? Like, everyone shut up and let me think. He's like, no one's got it, right? Not us, but not Ra's al Ghul, right? We've got what it left us, the black ooze and all that data. So at least it's a win. We have at least something, right? So one of the things that this kind of demonstrates, and one of the things that we always kind of knew, is that seemingly among these various evil individuals who are running the world, Ra's al Ghul, Hector Hammond, probably Absolute Joker, that there's a kind of space race, for lack of a better word, for meta-human powers, right? The same thing's happening in Absolute Flash, right? It's just all these things where they're trying to attain extreme levels of power, that metahumans are weapons to be used, to be collected, as opposed to protectors of the world. And so out on the moon, right, which is where the Green Lantern teleported to, you just kind of have John Stewart sitting there, where he asks the question, right, how far out is the world that's coming? And he says, closer every day. And then he just tells Sojourner, come back soon. And so at that point, you switch back to Cameron. And this is the part that I told you was super cool. So what goes on is she calls her partner, who turns out to be Simon Baz. So at this point right now, right, we have Kyle Rayner, who's been referenced, so we know he exists. We have Guy Gardner, who's currently within the Green Lantern, learning the powers of the Red Flame, right? The power of restraint. We've got John Stewart. We've got Hal Jordan. The only Earthbound Green Lantern that we're missing is Jessica Cruz. And I imagine it's only a matter of time before she comes in. And so one of the things that happens is you find out that they're essentially partners, right? Simon Baz and Cameron Chase are partners here. And that's where it all kind of starts getting pulled together. Because she asked the question, right? Like, I'm your partner. Who are you even working Evergreen with? And don't tell me they put Pemberton on it. You know, he says, oh, it's not Pemberton, right? You know the rules, Cam. You're emotionally involved. And that's when you find out that Cameron Chase's ex-wife is Sojourner Mullein. That's why her superior wouldn't send her out there. Because she can't be impartial. She can't be devoid and separate of everything that's going on. And what's crazy about this is Cameron doesn't know the Sojourner's there, right? She says she wasn't there anyway, right? She told me that she never wanted to go back, unless that was a lie too. And that's where Simon's like, see, emotionally involved. You can't do it. And so he tells her, I mean, you could always take the transfer, right? You know, career-wise, it would be a phenomenal idea. And so that's where she's like, Gateway's here, right? Evergreen's here. It's all here. What's out east? The Gotham thing? Some guy, right? She's like, I'm Coast City, born and raised. I'm not leaving this town until I find out what's going on. And that's a crazy thing, right? Because now we're starting to see these parts being pulled together. We're starting to see the absolute universe being yanked together, as opposed to just Batman here, Superman there, Wonder Woman there. It's a slow build, and they pick the best guys to do it, right? Dennis Camp, Al Ewing, Jason Aaron. These are the best guys to use to start pulling worlds together, telling these slow build stories that unify everything. And here's the craziness. In the midst of all of this, Cameron gets a knock at her door while she's talking to Simon, and she just kind of starts going on a bit of a tear about Sojourner, right? Like, I thought that I was done with her, right? She's a locked box of secrets, and I was done. And she says, God, Simon, how many times can Sojourner Mullein screw up my life? Only for her to find out the person at the door is Sojourner with Hal Jordan. With that being said, guys, we're going to bring this to an end. Absolute Green Lantern is so good. The Absolute Universe, man, it's incredible. I'll tell you guys this, man. You put a pen in the hand of Al Ewing, and he's going to write you one of the best comic books you've ever read in your entire life. This guy's phenomenal. Anyway, guys, we're going to bring this to an end. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, drop a like. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.